Hello
Hello.
and welcome to Two Mystics Walking to a Bar, except we're not walking to a bar because we never do. But anyway, here I am, Maggie Whitehouse, and there he is.
I am Peter Bolland. Hello.
Hello.
So I don't know if most folks checking in with us realize that Maggie and I are on two sides of the earth.
Yes, we are.
I am mid-morning here in San Diego, California, and Maggie is in England at the end of the day,
Yes,
early
and
evening, I suppose.
and come winter time, we're going to have a problem on a Friday because I have to light the Sabbath lights at dusk.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and it is of course summer solstice-ish, and so the sun is up plenty late. I bet you and I are both in the sunshine.
Oh,
Still, you're
yeah.
so far north, especially.
Yeah, mind you, we're sweltering here, but you wanted to
Yeah,
talk about God, I think. Cool. Go.
yeah. The word mystic is in our title, and I am often struck by mysticism. Maggie, I thought of you quite a bit just the other day. I gave a talk here in San Diego on Kabbalah. And I am a neophyte and a student, and I think of your great depth and experience and years of teaching and wisdom in this. And there's another example, isn't it, of one of the, in this case, one of the great Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, and a tradition that grew out of it that in its own understanding is deeply loyal and true to the core mission and message of Judaism, but nevertheless, as all mystical traditions do, they skirt toward the edge, and some folks in the mainstream aren't always so thrilled by some of the ways folks in those mystical traditions talk about the intimacy, about the oneness. I know there was some pushback toward the Kabbalah movement. It's too pantheistic. It's too much like the
Mm.
Trinity, splitting God up and all these different things. It's not monotheistic enough, etc. But we aren't here to adjudicate that discussion. But in a broader sense, I've been thinking always about how to think about God.
Mm.
And God, as Joseph Campbell says, God is an idea, God is a word that we apply to the mystery, the ground of being, the supreme
Mm.
being archetype. And the the thing I'm drawn to, whether it's in the Hindu tradition or in the mystical traditions of the Abrahamic faiths, is this idea that the truest way to talk about God is to say nothing at all.
Mm.
That the more you try to articulate the definitions and conceptual boundaries of this God idea and that God idea, the further away you get from experiencing the boundlessness of the divine. How do you navigate that tension in your own work or in your own life?
Oh boy, yes. Well, something you mentioned to me earlier was how to define God by what God is not, which is
Yes.
also very interesting because you can only tell a tree or a human by what is not that human, the way our brains are wired up. And we do want to define God all the time. For me, God is relationship. Not a relationship or a being, but relationship, the way everything relates to everything else. It's the sort of prime mover in that. And I'm fairly sure that spirit is dark matter. So, and you can't
Mhm.
define that. Really, the more we
Totally.
try and define God, the more we put God in boxes, and God won't go in a box. Every religion on the planet tries and stuff God in boxes. But
Yeah.
here I am. I'm a Christian minister. Okay, I'm an unorthodox one, but I am a Christian minister. I would call myself a Christian, just about a Jewish Christian. But
Just
the
about.
most extraordinary experience of my life was in the Grand Mosque at Kairouan. So here I am saying, oh, Christianity's great, but I'm on my face on the floor with awe in a Muslim temple. God,
Yes.
God is
Yes.
utterly undefinable. I think Joseph Campbell also said we can't even imagine God, let alone think about God, let alone speak about God without just getting it totally wrong.
Yes. And one of my touchstone texts in my lifelong, I almost don't want to say study of mysticism, and it sounds sort of disciplined and formal. It's more like a love affair, a little messy,
Yeah.
and of the mystics, and especially the Christian mystics. And I'm thinking about one text, The Cloud of Unknowing,
Mm.
which is, for our listeners, I know you know, 14th century Middle
Mm.
English text by an anonymous author. Uh, and it is so foundational the way that writer frames their approach. Presumably, this is a Catholic mystic, or
Yeah,
excuse me, priest,
yeah.
writing about this, but maybe not. Maybe it's an anchorite like Julian of
Julian?
Norwich, or whatever, man, woman, who knows? But it is such a powerful kind of like traveler's tale
Mm.
about how to experience God directly. And there's two key phases. First, the author says one must enter the cloud of forgetting. And when you go into the cloud of forgetting, you let go of all your images and definitions and concepts. I often think of it this way, that if you really want to know what God is, you have to forget everything you think you know about
Yeah,
God. And that's what that first
yeah,
stage is. That's not enough, but that's how you get ready for the next stage. And then what Kierkegaard might call the leap of faith, then you are ready for the second stage, which is the title of the book.
yeah,
You enter the cloud of unknowing. You've already gotten rid of everything you know, but now you enter into I don't know what, a boundlessness, some sort of state of consciousness where you no longer feel moved in any way, shape, or form to attach to a concept of God. You're not there to argue this God concept is not as good, this God
yeah,
concept is better. That's all gone. You
yeah,
left that in the cloud of forgetting. And now you're in the cloud of unknowing where God actually is.
yeah.
Now it gets tricky, but I find that such a kind of useful framework. I can't find a mystical tradition or a spiritual tradition on earth that doesn't align beautifully with that narrative.
Absolutely. And also, God will speak or appear to every single one of us in a way that's unique to us. So,
Yes.
if I'm more clairaudient than anything else, so I do hear the voice of God, but you may
Mm,
be kinesthetic or you may be clairvoyant, so you'll see an
yeah.
aspect of God. And everybody's going to pick this up entirely differently. And I'm quite sure that the vastness and unknowingness of the Godhead, which is beyond anything we can conceive, also has a sort of refining, personalized accent, so that each one of us gets this one bit that is
Oh,
knowledgeable of us and cognizant of who we are and where we are. So you
mm,
get the speaking that's relevant to you. That may be angels, it could be guides, it could be guardian angels, all these things that people put between themselves and gods. But I think they're just degrees of focus in
yeah.
something that is in relationship with absolutely everything. God is in a fascinated relationship with the slugs on my lettuce. You know, and I may not like that, but then you have to get back into that cloud of forgetting and say, stop with your prejudices about slugs eating your lettuce. Let's get into the cloud of unknowing. For all you know, God is in the slug. And
Yeah.
you mentioned pantheism earlier. I think it's really important more and more to define the difference between pantheism and panentheism,
Yeah.
because pantheism is everything is God. That slug
Right.
is God. Whereas panentheism is God is imbuing that slug. And just saying that to me, it takes me back into the cloud of unknowing because it's okay, what do you mean by that? The slug is not God, but the slug is imbued by, oh my God. So God imbues everything. So God, and then you start getting to the fact that people sometimes don't like the idea of God and diversity. Have they seen how many beetles there are?
Right.
You know,
Oh my
there are
goodness.
millions of different kinds of beetles. God was just going, let's have another beetle. Let's have another beetle.
Well, I love the panentheism concept, and
Mm.
I know the last thing we need is more intellectual discernments, but damn it, they're important because
Yeah.
they keep us from error.
Yeah.
And as long as we don't cling too tightly to these, I'm a panentheist, and make t-shirts and so on. There is something beautiful in that idea that there is a sacred source that is in some ways transcendent, and yet everything that emanates from it, that pours forth from it, all matter and energy and consciousness, remains somehow identical to it.
Yeah.
Um, that's different than saying a slug is God, because that's just terribly misleading. And I was thinking toward the end of my talk the other day on Kabbalah, I think about the Hasidic movement,
Mm.
and which is so influenced by Kabbalah, and then that leads me to Abraham Joshua Heschel and Martin Buber, these two wonderful 20th century
Mm.
Jewish voices, also deeply impacted by Hasidism and those stories, and the basic Kabbalah idea that Ein Sof emanates through the 10
Sephiroth. Yeah.
Sophi- through, and that all of this is part of that. And Martin Buber's claim in I and Thou, that is relational. Your comment
Yeah.
before that God is the name we give to the interdependency, the interrelationship between all things, so that when I see a tree as a thou,
Mm.
instead of as an it, how many board
Yes.
feet of lumber can I get out of that tree when I cut it down? But see it as a thou, as a being of inherent infinite value, as am I and everything else. The way I see the world invites the divine into the relationship. God is in the I and thou
Yeah.
relationship, Buber says. And God is absent from the I-it
Yes.
relationship. So in that sense, we have, I don't know if power is the right word. We have the opportunity
Yes.
to draw divinity nearer simply by perceiving and apprehending and relating with the world differently. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And also, what I love about Kabbalah is the way it just infuses the teaching with a different depth. I mean, for example, Christians will always say that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God because the Gospel of John, only begotten. But
Yeah.
if you talk to a Kabbalist, the Kabbalist will say, the only begotten of God is known as Adam Kadmon, which is the primordial essence of humanity. And that lives in the
Oh,
top world of the four worlds, which you can just about see behind me,
I
of
see. Yes.
Absolute. And Adam Kadmon is the primordial origin. And that's what is in Genesis 1. Male and female created they them both.
Yeah.
One human being, but all sexes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in chapter 2, when Yahweh comes across, because Elohim is the God of chapter 1, the creatrix of the universe, and then Yahweh comes along and is basically the God of humanity, because this is the point at which humanity is formed, not the imagination of humanity, the concept, but the actual, how is this going to work? It's going to be male, female, that kind of thing. And that's when it says it was not good for the human to be alone, so God decided to divide him into two. Again, we get the translation that God took a rib, well, it's Zela actually means side. And if you count the ribs on a man and woman, we've got the same amount of ribs. So what happened to your rib? Uh,
Well, we had an extra.
yeah, is that what it is? But it's, yeah, of course you did. But it's just this idea of actually opening up to the fact that there is this concept of Adam Kadmon, and every human being is
Yeah.
one cell within that divine human. Just like every horse is one cell within the divine horse, and every slug is one cell within the divine slug, which
Sure.
means that we are all the only begotten of God.
Yeah.
And doesn't that change it? Doesn't that just make you realize I am in relationship with the Holy One because I am a unique
That's right.
child of
Yeah.
this one aspect, the only begotten? And when you just carve it out and say, oh, Jesus was the only begotten of God, it just
Yeah.
excludes everybody. And the mystics, just, I don't know any mystical person who will ever say you are excluded from God because God is in your relationship with you.
And so we can say with one breath that all is one, and yet each individual is uniquely
Yeah,
precious, divine, important, significant.
yeah,
People, I think, from the West, where duality and atomization and differentiation reign, when they first hear about non-dualistic theologies or systems, they feel a little insulted that they don't matter anymore, that
yeah,
they've disappeared into, the hive mind or something. It sounds so
yes,
threatening to
yeah,
those really acculturated and conditioned into individualism. But
mm,
it's both and always.
yeah,
And it
always.
doesn't diminish our unique significance in the least. In fact, it feels and sounds to me as if it enhances it because now we're in a protective community instead of me against the world.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Contact with Jodie Foster?
Sure, it's been a
There's this
minute, but
wonderful
yes.
piece in it where she's going through space, and you have to see this in a cinema or in a giant, where no, it's at the very beginning, isn't it? Where they just show going through space and all the planets, all the stars, and then it closes down to the iris of a human eye.
Yeah.
And also when she goes through space, it's utterly stunning, and everything is in patterns. That's the other thing about Kabbalah that I love. It just says this is a pattern of creation. These two diagrams behind my head are simply the smaller one is the diagram of a human being, and the larger one is a diagram of the universe, and everything fits on it. You can get terribly intellectual about it, or you can just say, okay, I am on that pattern somewhere. I may just be a pimple on Adam Cadmon's cheek right now, but I'm there.
Yeah. So in Christian theology, and I'm no expert, I'm not a theologian, but in your reading, you come upon these things. I first learned about it in Hinduism, where they call it neti, 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 N-E-T-I, three times. It means not this, not that, not this.
Oh, that's
And it's the
lovely.
way of talking about Brahman.
Brahma.
And Brahman is not a deity. It's not a personified God. Um, it is the ground of being out of which everything, including all the gods, comes. And so Brahman Atman it is that sacred presence inside of everything, including us. And they have two ways of talking about Brahman. One is Saguna Brahman and Nirguna. And guna means attribute or quality. And so nirguna means no qualities, no attributes. And saguna is with qualities and attributes. So they create this opportunity for mystics and more positive theologians, the folks who like to talk about God and
Mm.
God is all knowing, God is all loving, God is this and that. And then they have this whole list in the Quran, the 99 names of God, the judgmental, the merciful, qualities that one attributes to God.
Mm.
Omniscience, omnipotence, omnibenevolence, omnipresence. And that's fine. There's no criticism of that at all. That's the struggle of humans who are born with these conceptual minds to talk about and understand the mystery. But then right next to that is Nirguna Brahman, where the teaching is the best way to get closest to Brahman is only to talk about it in negative terms, as you mentioned, the via
Mm.
negativa, which is how it is in Latin. And so the Western Christian tradition is via negativa or saguna Brahman. I flipped that. Via negativa or nirguna Brahman. And if you're going to talk about God, via positiva, the
Mm.
what are the attributes of God or Saguna Brahman. I'm just struck by that.
Yeah.
There's even more apathetic theology or cataphatic. That's the same thing, that we cannot say what God is, but only what God is not. And that aligns with Taoism, the opening line, the Tao that can be told
Mm.
is not Tao.
Yes.
And so we learn how to play with that. And so I no longer argue with anybody about God because we're just sort of arguing about our conceptualizations
Yeah.
about God. And I like hearing them all, but I don't think it's prudent or wise for me to say, well, mine's better than yours, and let me argue with you
Yeah.
about it. That
Yeah.
seems like a kind of a tragic thing. And the Eastern Church is so much more comfortable with that via
Mm.
negativa. It's kind of more on the surface
Yes.
than out of the Catholic and
Yeah.
the Protestant traditions, that the Eastern Orthodox, all we can do is approach God
Yeah.
and not know or conceptually understand. So I have a question for you with all that in mind.
Oh, rats. I had an
Is,
answer for the previous point, but go on.
well, you can do both or whatever you like, but is mysticism and agnosticism?
As in, I don't know.
Right.
Mm. Yeah. It's a spirit, it's a divine agnosticism, as in I do not know. Yes. It's very powerful to be able to say I do not know. And of course, Christianity has done horrendous things to mysticism by putting these pictures of God up. I mean, the Sistine Chapel ceiling is wonderful art and lousy theology. And we put this old man in the sky again and again and again. So people think that they know what God is. And the thing about getting through that is actually to get to the ultimate name of God, which is works so wonderfully with the Brahman Atman idea, which is I am that I am, Ahir Asher Ahir, which means that whatever I perceive God to be is what will be reflected back to me as God.
Yes.
And people don't tend to think that, but if you think God is judgmental and harsh by what we now call the law of attraction, but what Jesus said, ask and it is given, or measure for measure, which is in the Hebrew Testament. Basically, if you think that is God, then the universe actually has to start reflecting that back to you. So I think
If God,
that,
yeah, if God is imageless and in some ways formless, then
mm,
as you encounter it, naturally it's going to take the shape of your acculturated
yeah,
concepts.
yeah, yeah,
Christians will see Jesus,
yeah,
Muslims will see Muhammad. And there's nothing exclusive about that or wrong about that. It's just what mentation does. It's what thinking does, is it
it
thinks
is.
in forms.
Yes.
You can't think no thinking.
No. No, you can. And you're absolutely right about the images or whatever will come to you. Not my first experience, mystical experience, that was when I was 9 in a church, which was extraordinary. That was color I could taste and sound I could see and light that was in my body. That was just extraordinary. But um, in later years, this was when I was still a journalist before I started the actual journey, before I married Henry and he died and the whole shebang went tits up, pardon my expression, but that was what called me to research this stuff. But I literally came home from work one day, walked into the living room, and I could see with my third eye, I didn't even know I had a third eye, that Jesus was sitting on my coffee table in a toga. Well, of course, he'd had to be there in a toga because up to that point, I'd only ever seen Jesus in a toga.
In all the movies. Right.
All the movies, all the pictures in the churches, all that kind of thing.
That's right.
But the reason I knew that it was a genuine vision was because when God does speak, it's so unexpected.
Hmm.
It's never anything that your own brain would have come up with. So there we are. It's about 6:30 in the evening, and this strange thing that I think I can see is just says, turn on the television. And you're going,
What?
I turned on the television. Now, in those days, we had 4 channels in the
Yeah,
United
what
Kingdom.
channel, Jesus?
Yeah, what channel? But no, the telly just turned on automatically. And it was a rerun of a program we have every week called Songs of Praise, which is where they go to a church and televise a church service with lots of stories about the people who work in that church.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I turned it on and I went, okay, that's a bit of a coincidence. And then what I got in my head was, see what they've done to me. And I just thought, what? And that was it. I went and made myself a cup of tea or had a gin and tonic or something more likely in those days. And it just buzzed around in my head for years and years and years until suddenly I realized that there was a calling that said, this is not exactly the church I want.
Hmm.
And you go, oh yeah, but what am I going to do about it? And here we are, dozens of years later, trying to do something about it.
I find that story so compelling. You used a term earlier in our conversation today about having more of an aptitude for auditory or
Mm, yes.
hearing God. Other people might be listening and think, well, I've never heard God speak, so I guess I'm hopeless. But
No, you
but
just haven't
that's not your
listened.
point at all. I'm quite
No.
sure. You just have this capacity. I could easily report I've never heard anything like that in my life. It comes
Oh,
through me through different
yeah.
windows, and that's your point. But
Mm.
what are some of the other ways that one might have the experience of the divine, again, which is different than the conceptual awareness. This isn't concepts, this is experience. How might it come through besides in a voice or a clear vision of a roba, of a guy in a toga
Oh
at your
my.
kitchen table?
Well, everybody's different, but I will always say, just say, ask a question.
Hmm.
Like, is it a good idea for me to go to San Francisco? That was one question I asked years ago. And just say, will you give me a sign that I can understand?
Hmm.
Always add that I can understand. Um, and many years ago, when I was studying healing, which is one of the reasons why I was turned down for Church of England ordination, because I was a trained healer.
Which, yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so I was offered a course to train as a teacher of healing in my tradition, but it was a rather unusual one, and I knew that my current teacher would not approve of it. But it was calling, so I literally said, "Okay, I need to know, is this a gift from heaven, or is it a challenge for my ego? Sign, please, 48 hours." And oddly enough, you will get if you ask very clearly. And the
Good.
next day, I had a client for healing, and we were sitting in my therapy room, and half a bread roll fell down the chimney. And she said,
What?
"Oh, look, manna from heaven."
Ah. Wow.
Now, it was only half a bread roll. It wasn't a whole bread roll. So the sign was actually saying it's a good thing, but not the best. But you will get signs. You've got to be very careful with signs because our egos are wired. Our amygdala at the back here is wired so that it looks for things that are familiar. And I know when I was engaged to a guy, he kept seeing red citrons everywhere. There weren't any more red citrons. It just happened that I was driving one at the time, and his mind was automatically looking for me, so he saw more red citrons.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you say, give me a sign that of a yes or a no, I had another one quite recently. I mean, I hope all this is all right. It's very weird and what my friend Ali calls wanky bollocks. But I
Ah,
was just saying, okay, this is what I heard from you, but I need to know whether I'm not deluding myself. I always will say, am I not, am I deluding myself? And what I got in my head was pink.
yeah.
And I thought, pink? So I sort of intuited that if it was genuine, I would experience something pink, took the dog for a walk, and a woman cycled past me in a bright pink fleece and actually stopped and said, "Cute dog." And I said, "Thank you very much. Do you usually wear that fleece?" And she said, "No, I've never worn it before in my life. It's been in the cupboard for 6 years. I just knew I had to wear it today." So I tend to
Yeah.
think that kind of thing. And it just takes practice because I used to say, God doesn't speak to me. And a friend, Giles, said, "No, God is speaking to everybody all the time. You're just not listening." And
Right.
if you want to listen, you've got to create a little bit of space to start with. There comes a point when God will go, "Oi, Maggie!" But to start with, God's exceedingly polite, isn't going to push in anywhere.
I keep coming back with your examples and stories to that idea from the beginning of our discussion today about God being in the relationship or in the interrelationship, what
Mm,
the Zen Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing.
yeah,
Again, just trying to find words for the way everything is woven together into
yeah,
a mutually arising, mutually causational field of phenomenon or
yeah,
phenomena or happenings. And we're in it and we're a part of it. And I can't help but thinking about love as the word, one of the other words that we use to describe that,
yeah.
to describe the way the world's beauty just breaks your heart. How can you be in love with a moor or with a sunrise or with a beach? But you are.
Mhm.
And when you have that feeling washing through you, that's not a concept. You are being carried away by an awareness. Abraham Joshua Heschel calls it awe.
Yes.
And that's the door through which we meet the divine.
Yeah.
Heschel has this line, he says, I never once asked God for money or power or fame. I asked God for awe and he gave it to me.
Yeah.
And to walk in awe.
Awe.
And I think awe isn't something you passively hope to bump into someday. Rightfully speaking, awe is a decision you make
Yes.
to be in awe. It isn't always easy, and you don't fault yourself for not being able to snap your fingers and feel awestruck all the time, but it is ever present, and it's just a matter of shifting the perception a little bit
Mm.
this way into that I-thou relationship. That there is something here that is endlessly abiding, endlessly sustaining, generative, and that's and dare I say loving.
Mm.
And that's why in more traditional religious language in Christianity, we say God is love. And Paul's incredible passage about the qualities of love,
Mm. Mm.
those are not about romantic love. Those are about a whole new relationship with everything.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful and it's sustaining. And I think it's what the soul is asking for. The soul is longing for.
Yeah. And in the Hebrew Testament, there's a phrase, I think it's Deuteronomy, which is translated as fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Yes, it's your tagline.
I can't remember
Next.
the Hebrew, but the word is awe.
Yeah, yeah,
Because sometimes when you're awestruck, you are also frightened.
right. I
I've been
see those
in,
stickers on the back of lifted trucks
yeah,
with gun racks and MAGA
yeah.
flags, and the sticker says "Fear God," and it's some
No, it means
biblical
be in
reference, and it's
awe.
like,
And when
yeah,
you're in awe, you are in that relationship.
yeah,
You are part of that relationship. You're not even relationship with God, you are relationship. Because
yes,
awe comes naturally when you go, oh, this is real in me now.
yeah. And I only really exist in relationship. There is no individual cut off from everything else. That might be a misstep conceptually again, because in reality, nothing's separate from anything, and
No, and
that
loneliness is
affirms that.
usually lack of awe.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's a topic we need to touch on in a future episode. There is an epidemic of loneliness. That's how a lot of magazine
there
article
is.
writers call
Yeah,
it.
there is.
And I think it's true. And there's a lot of factors and reasons. But, as you and I are wont to do, I think what a lot of the Psychology Today articles miss is that there's a really deep kind of metaphysical, spiritual component to loneliness. Is it isn't just about hanging out in cafes more and talking to strangers,
No,
although that is good. But it is, there's something more more deep tissue at work than just
there
not
is.
talking to people anymore.
Yeah,
So we'll have to put that on our list of possible future things.
fabulous. Let's do that. Do you have a poem,
I
Peter?
do have a poem for us today. It is a poem from Rumi, and it is Coleman Barks translation, and the poem is called Only Breath. I thought it might fit
Mm.
in whatever it was we were going to talk about today. Here it is, Only Breath by Rumi. Not Christian or Jew or Muslim, not Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi, or Zen, not any religion or cultural system. I am not from the East or the West, not out of the ocean or up from the ground, not natural or ethereal, not composed of elements at all. I do not exist, am not an entity in this world or the next, did not descend from Adam and Eve or any origin story. My place is placeless, a trace of the traceless, neither body or soul. I belong to the beloved, have seen the two worlds as one, and that one call to and know, first, last, outer, inner, only that breath breathing human being.
Yeah, said it
Yeah,
all. We don't need to say another word. Thank
no, we
you.
don't. Thank you, Maggie. Thanks, everyone. See you next
Thanks,
time.
Peter. Blessings.